Good day to and welcome. Today I'm here to tell you about my little theory that I have, which is that reviewing is a lot like language testing. And well, everyone had those few language tests, right? Almost everyone who had to learn their own language in school, or anyone who was taught or taught themselves a foreign language. This is more or less about foreign language. I am a English teacher trainee, linguist trainee, so I'm into it. I've been in this, let's say, for 5 years, and I see some correlations there. Right away, I have to say that I'm not a reviewer. I'm reviewing things for a hobby because I want to see games from a different perspective. And doing these somewhat reviews or evaluations helps me vocalize why I like the game. It helps me analyze the game and analyze the concepts and ground stuff there, which is important because if you say that you like it, you should know why you like it. And if you can vocalize why you like it and actually analyze the game, then you are not only a better gamer but also a better consumer, because you know or can at least expect which games might actually interest you. Now, back to this theory. So, reviewing is a lot like language testing. And, well, there are a few reasons why I think this, but I'm gonna talk about this one main reason, and that is the, let's say, stages. Because with every single game, you probably start with a placement test. That's it, placement test. Every single time you entered a course, or most of the time you entered the course, you had some kind of placement test and they gave you one specific group or any other group, sorry for that. Now in language, or language classes or lessons, these are divided by, let's say, performance. Because you want to have more advanced groups, intermediate groups, beginners groups, and these things. In video games, we could actually say that this is like genre specific, because at the first you have to place your game into some kind of bracket. This is where some reviewers right away fail. I remember a review of Alien Isolation where this guy who usually reviews FPS, like, you know, someone who gives Call of Duty, who gives every single time Call of Duty 10 out of 10, is complaining in Alien Isolation that you can't kill the alien. Even though you have a gun, you can't actually kill it properly. And it's like, really, you completely missed the point. You haven't done your placement test. And that's it. The placement test is done because you don't want to review an FPS as a strategy game, or a horror game as an FPS. If there is supposed to be that feeling of powerlessness, you can't give a player this feeling of powerful being that you can actually kill with a gun, because that completely nullifies the feeling of powerlessness in there, the despair. So the placement test is really important right away as the first step. As I said, if even inside the little genres, you have to see what you're going for. For example, strategies. Lately, I've reviewed Stellaris, and Stellaris, it's a solid 4X game, but it's from Paradox Entertainment, and Paradox is doing grand strategy. So I had this little fight in myself whether I should actually review it as a 4X, because as a 4X it's actually like 8, 9 out of 10, probably, if we set down to scores, which isn't correct, but yeah, we'll get to that later. But as a Paradox game, it's like 7 out of 10 in terms of scores. Of course, it's still a good game, but if you compare it to other Paradox games and you wanted to see it, you see that it's actually worse than the other games, because there are features missing. And well, you have to decide where you want to place this one, because if you place it in a bad bracket or a bad shelf, you're gonna make a bad review right away. Now, the second thing you do after you get a placement test, you're part of the class, you have these progress tests, which is like after every lesson or after, let's say, 2 or 3 months, sometimes even after a term if you have it like for 2 terms. And well, these are just to see whether you actually managed to go through the lessons and actually learn something, because because this progress test can be on, let's say, the first term you learned conditionals and present perfect and something like that, and you'll have these things in there. It's very similar in reviewing theory, because you have these stages, which you can, like, in some games it would be chapters, in some games it would be maps. Now I'm going to talk a bit about Dark Souls, because, or maybe not even Dark Souls, or Might and Magic 10 would be a better example, because Dark Souls has this one, and after every single map you can tell yourself that, okay, the previous map was actually better. If we say talk about Dark Souls 1, then in Dark Souls 1 the Undead Burg and the Undead Parish is extremely well done. However, there are other maps which aren't as amazing in terms of design. And from this you can see that the progress is slightly worse. Just because the first progress test, which we did, was that they completely managed to do what we expected from the placement since the placement test. But in the second progress test, there were some errors, some mistakes, some slips, and well, they just haven't managed to deliver this 100% experience. This can be very well seen in this Might and Magic 10 Legacy, which has this first map, which is amazing. This is Might and Magic that everyone's been waiting for. But on the second map it slows down, the tempo goes the whole game is much slower, some ideas are missing there which were in the first map, and overall the feeling is kind of not there anymore. And as you continue to the third map, the feeling is completely gone. It's not a bad game even after the third, even at the third map. It's just mediocre, and it's a pity, because the placement test was really good. You ticked all the boxes right, and you were like, okay, so this is not actually on the market. This is nice. Now it's unique. It's retro. So yeah, everything was right, and the first map everything was right. The first progress test was done extremely well. But as you continue and you do and after the second map you create or do this second progress test, you see that some things were missing actually. It wasn't that good anymore, and the third progress test just shows you that, okay, there's something wrong. So if we go through these progress tests after some chapters, after these things, you could do it in Telltale games, which actually give you these chapters. And if you review a whole Telltale game, you should probably review a Telltale game as a whole after, let's say, this year, or how long does it take to finish those. You can see that every single chapter is different, and some are stronger, some are weaker, and these are the progress tests. And after a while, you get 2 types of tests, because you can see them actually. There is this diagnostic test and there is this proficiency test. Proficiency test is something that some of you have done in English, in German, in Spanish. It's like those FCE or CAE or TEFL. Really something that tells you that, okay, you have managed this, right, you have this rating. And that can be actually compared to scoring. Yeah, that's it. Your goal, this is purely criterion based, and they have these tick boxes, let's say, and you have like, okay, so they know past tenses, they know future tenses, they do this, they know this, they know this, and this is proficiency test. And you can say, okay, you scored 95 out of 100, and it's nice. However, this completely nullifies strengths and weaknesses right away. Even though you can implement them and you can somewhat talk about, like, you did you didn't do so well there, it's not really there to measure what you did right and what you did wrong, but what you know. And in games, this is very similar. You're going for the tick boxes. Is this there? Is this not there? Is this there? Okay. And you might not actually be looking for something new, or some strengths and some weaknesses that aren't your tick boxes. And that's where diagnostic tests come for. Because in diagnostic test, your main goal is to analyze strengths and weaknesses of your learner or your student or anyone who's in the class. So you want to know on what to focus next. And in video games, I'd say that this diagnostic test, or at least in reviews, this diagnostic test is something that reviewers should prefer, because the proficiency test was really popular, like proficiency test style reviewing was really popular between 1990s and 210s, and now, or 2010s, and now this is just like we're moving towards more subjective style. We don't want to really see 95 out of 100 because it doesn't really tell you a lot, considering that 5 is considered a good game, even though 5 should be really mediocre. 1 should be a bad game. Have you seen a game that got scores below 4? I haven't for a while, and that's one of the problems. But if you read the review, if you really read and see or hear all the points, which is like the evaluation of diagnostic test, you see that some things are better, some things are weaker, but you know specific things. It's not like, okay, the whole game is supposed to be good, and you enter a game and see that the combat is shitty. And it's like, okay, so the main thing is not that good, but everything else is great. But the main thing is not good. Like, is it 9 out of 10? Yeah, no, I'm not sure, because the main concept is bad. And in diagnostic test, if you were to read the whole review or listen to a whole review, you would see that this is the case. That's why after every single review that I'm doing, I'm including this little, let's say, box where you have strengths and weaknesses, the major ones. And I'm also not giving score. I'm saying that it's good, that whether it's good, great, solid, bad, mediocre. Because you can just, if I say 5 out of 10, you think it's a bad game. But if I say that it's a mediocre game, you think like, oh, it might be fine. It might be my cup of tea. So this is the theory behind it, and I partially think that we should slowly turn from, or slowly, or rather quickly, we're slowly turning, but we should probably get faster from the proficiency test style of reviewing to diagnostic test style of reviewing. Because from proficiency test you get some quick results and like, yeah, you overall know what's wrong and what's well done, but from diagnostic test you get a lot of information. And well, if you see a movie, let's get an example from another field. If you get a movie and you see that the average score is like 6, are you gonna say that it's a bad movie? No. You're gonna most likely go through those written reviews and read a bad one, a good one, and let's say a mediocre one. Meaning the scores. Let's say someone gives it 1 star, someone gives it 4 stars, someone gives it 2.5 or 3. You're gonna read these 3, and based on those, you probably will create some kind of image of the movie in your mind. For me, a good example of this are Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. Because Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, or at least the comedies, are rather entertaining. They're not greatly done, you know, the acting is not really top of the class, but it's funny. And as comedy should be funny, and it doesn't really have to have some kind of subtext or stuff like this, then, well, It's just entertaining. Is it entertaining? Yeah, it fails the placement test. Is it entertaining during the whole movie? Yeah, it fails the progress test. And after the end, you can just, okay, so this was good, this was bad, and well, I'm not sure whether 6 is the right one. Just because I'm gonna say that it's a good movie. It managed to fulfill what I wanted it to fulfill. And creating a score from this is somewhat bad. Because people just right away expect... People don't know what your 6 means. And what their 6 is might be something different, really. This is the gaming stuff. If you have a game which is 5, so for some it's bad, for some it's mediocre. If you have a game which is 7 out of 10, which should be pretty good, for a lot of people it's a bad game, because it's just 7. Everything which is under 8 is bad, because 8 is like okay-ish, 9 is good, and 10 is amazing. Like, really, this scale doesn't really make sense. But some people have this scaling. But if you say that it is good, then it's just good. And everyone has more or less the same idea about good, about mediocre, about great, about amazing, about perfect. People have these boxes more or less developed in the same way. And that's why we should slowly move from the scores towards written and longer evaluations. And also, as I said, this creates a better consumer. The same way this diagnostic test is supposed to make a better learner, meaning that you have a person who has these strengths and weaknesses, and you can then focus on these strengths and weaknesses as a teacher and improve the student while this. As a consumer, you improve yourself from the review. Because the diagnostic, even though the diagnostic test is not set on you, it's set on the game, you can see the results of the diagnostic test, and you can see the strengths and weaknesses, and you can see whether, okay, so let's say that which game would be really good for this one. I wonder. Okay, let's go for Dark Souls 2, because we have already talked about Dark Souls. The combat in Dark Souls 2 is still okay. It's not as quick or as responsive, but it has some extra features. So there is this thing. Do you want to have really tight controls, such as in Dark Souls 1, or do you want to have more options, as in Dark Souls 2? This is a strength and this is a weakness. Do you want to have a big map which is slightly more linear, or do you want to have this puzzle-like or maze-like map which is vertical, not horizontal as the Dark Souls 2? And which one do you prefer? Do you want to have this puzzle-like feeling from the game, or do you want to have this nice linear story where you actually going from one to the next, and this is more fluent because there are none of these backtracking things, or if there is some backtracking, it's much quicker. So the pacing is actually better than in the first game. So this is it. Do you want to have this feeling of a complete and really filled world which fits into each other as a puzzle, or do you want to have the spacing in the world? And this is a strength and this is a weakness. And depending on which you focus, you might actually, as a consumer, continue and create yourself an image of the game, and you can start, and if you play after reading a review, or if you have played before reading a review, you can now say to yourself, okay, so this makes sense. Unlike 6 out of 10 and just a hint like map is good, then you're like, okay, this makes sense, this is actually right, I actually like this, and I actually dislike this. And you will take a look and actually focus on these things in the next game you play. And this way, an informed consumer is created. And an informed consumer is much better than an uninformed one, which is like, let's say, brand reliant. If you have people just buying Call of Duty because it's Call of Duty, they are not good consumers. They are good consumers for Activision, but they are not good consumers overall because it doesn't improve the quality of industry. But if they are actually focusing and analyzing the other games and the Call of Duty, they can actually say like, okay, so Call of Duty has these pros over Battlefield, and Battlefield has these pros over Call of Duty, and Arma has these pros over these two, and they might actually decide whether like, okay, actually I have more in common with Battlefield than in Call of Duty. Why am I so stuck with Call of Duty? Just because there is this brand loyalty? Is it? Is it because I liked Call of Duty as a when I was young, when it was the Second World War themed? No. So you might continue. You might actually find out that there are games which are more suited to you than these three altogether, because you might start looking for something which is quick-paced, something that is, let's say, slightly arcade shooter. It's not Counter-Strike, because Counter-Strike has these, it has a hard shooting compared to Call of Duty. So, for example, some people actually switched from Call of Duty to Titanfall just because of the quickness, and then back to Call of Duty because it was quicker again. And if you want a quick-paced shooter, then there are some on the market, and they might not be these AAAs, but you might enjoy them a lot because you have already analyzed that you want a quick-paced shooter. That's it. So, I hope that you liked the theory. If you liked, if you disliked, please comment. I would like to hear about it. And, well, my name has been Mecharization. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.